Hello and welcome to the first work session for completing the Valley Blossoms quilt design by Quiltworx.com and Fabric Confetti. Work sessions were created to provide a solution for online video to teach people how to make Quiltworx patterns. Traditionally, Quiltworx patterns have been taught in a classroom setting over multiple days and hours of teaching time with one-on-one instruction by a teacher. Creating videos to accomplish the same overall goal has been a challenge, and as a result, we have come up with work sessions which allow you to break the pattern up into several smaller video groups and complete different sections of your pattern one at a time. These videos are then released over a few-month period. This way, you will have time to complete the sewing for each section as you go. The Valley Blossoms quilt includes 3 sections called the Basket Diamond, the Flower and Cactus, and the Bridal Bouquet Queen border. In addition to these 3 sections of the quilt, there is applique across the entire design, which could be completed using 2 different techniques: turn under applique, which is taught by Judy Niemeyer, or a digitized embroidery technique taught by Vanessa from Fabric Confetti. This video series will introduce you to both of these techniques, which will make it much easier to complete applique designs from Quiltworx.com and Fabric Confetti in the future. Today's video will teach you how to make the basket diamond. If you have not already done so, you will need to first purchase your pattern and fabrics for your design. The pattern is available through many quilt shops, on Quiltworx.com, and also through Quiltster in the marketplace. You may also find kits that have been pre-designed by our sellers in the Quiltster platform in the marketplace, or you may be able to find them with your local quilt shop. Quiltworx.com is not a fabric retailer, so please look to these 2 resources to learn more about what's available. If you are looking for a shop that may be creating kits, please consider following the Quiltworx Kits and Classes group on Facebook. Many shop owners showcase their available kits there with information on how to purchase. Many of you have already completed the pre-class instructions, but if you are stumbling upon this video series for the first time, please go back to videos from April 17th, which are posted on our YouTube channel, for both pre-class instructions and how to use Quiltster to color the Valley Blossoms pattern to learn more. Quiltster will help you quickly create a custom colorway if this is your desire, using fabrics from your own stash or fabrics that you can purchase from a quilt shop. If you have already completed these pre-class videos, you are ready for today's workshop with Judy. If not, hit pause, go back and complete the steps presented there, and come back and join us when you are done. Now that this video is posted, it will be available forever and you can come back to it anytime you like. You might also note that this block is used in other Quiltworx designs, such as the Rainforest Blossoms or the Meadow Star Mixer series, where you can choose your own size of a quilt to make, then choose your own combination of blocks to work with. If you have chosen the basket diamond blocks, this video will help you complete that version of your quilt as well. It is now time to join Judy in the classroom to make your basket diamonds.
Good morning, ladies. Today we're going to start working on the basket diamond, which is the actual center round of this quilt that we're working on. You should in your pattern have a booklet that reads basket diamond, so you want to make sure you're on the right pages, right? The basket diamond is actually it involves a couple different techniques. So we do some just general paper piecing right here. And then we're going to do some curved paper piecing. And then we're going to move on and do some applique and show you how we set up our applique design. All right, so the first place we're going to start is with the cutting instructions and organizing. So when you're with your pattern, if you look at your pattern, the very first page, it talks about some Ziploc bags here, and you need to set up 2 Ziploc bags for this group. And we have 2 Ziploc bags sitting here, and you're going to label those bags and the label on them is going to be AB1. And I'm just going to put AB1 on here. And then we're going to have an AB2. Okay. Alongside of that, it tells you what's supposed to go into that bag, but you're not going to put anything in there right now because you have to go through the process of cutting things out. And then we'll slip them in the bag. So when we get all the cutting done, both these bags will be full of the fabric and the paper. All right. So we're going to set the bags aside for now. And then we're going to move on to the foundation papers. So the next thing it talks about is preparing your foundation papers right here. And we show you guys graphics in here. And so once you cut up your papers and you lose a piece, you're like, well, wait a minute, I didn't get that piece. So if you'll go back to your graphics usually it's on the first and second page, you will see pictures of what was actually on your foundation sheets before you cut any of the papers up, all right? And then that'll tell you whether or not you had what you needed to start. So here are our foundation papers right here. If you look at it, they have an MP number here, and it will tell you how many sheets you should have. We're only making 8 diamonds, and so we need 1 sheet of the baskets, and those are our foundation papers, which these are what we sew on. Then we have another page in here, and we only have 1 page of this. And this actually has all of our template pieces on it. So I'm going to show you how to cut out the foundation papers, and then I'm going to show you how to cut out the templates. All right, so we're going to set the template page aside, and we're going to start here with our foundation papers. And you're not going to see the whole sheet as I do this, and I probably won't show the whole sheet when we're cutting, because you don't need to watch me for 10 minutes cutting out these papers. It really won't take us 10 minutes, but what I like to do is actually take a ruler and place it about 1/8 of an inch outside the finished line on those units. And I'll go through the whole page and actually cut all of the straight lines first. After I get my straight lines cut, then I'll go back and I'll actually hand cut with free motion cutting and cut all the curves. So I'm gonna quit and not do any more. Now we're gonna come in and we're gonna just take this, and I'm gonna do free motion curve cutting with my rotary cutter. And all I have to do is just hold the paper down. And then we're going to set our piece to the side, and then we do the next one as well. Now, when you're cutting out your papers, if you just you can actually be a little bit careful in the cutting process and keep yourself organized as you go. Because if you just start with a pattern and cut everything out and just throw it in a big pile, you're never going to know how to go back and sort everything. So do 1 page at a time. Do what it tells you to do with those papers. Set them aside, put them in the bags that it tells you to do. Put them in, and then move to the next sheet. If you're doing a pattern where you have several layers, some of our patterns might have like 6 or 7 pieces stacked underneath there. You can actually stack all of those together by simply stapling them and then cutting through all the layers at one time. Okay, now we're going to get rid of the excess paper here and get our table cleaned off again. Once you get all of your papers cut out, then I want you to take a paper clip, and sometimes you might need a couple paper clips, and you're just going to clip all of those together so that you don't lose them. We have 8 pieces in here. And then we're going to go back to our instructions, and it says that these papers go into bag AB1. It says unit A1 on there. So you always want to look at that unit number. So I'm going to slip these end bag AB1. Now we're going to cut out our template pieces. So first of all, I'm going to just cut this sheet in half so that we can do one half at a time. And we're going to explain a little bit of difference between our templates here. So we have this big template, and this is actually, if you'll notice, it has applique design on it. That's actually the same exact image in which you're going to use when we put the applique onto our quilt. And you're going to cut the whole thing out, and then we have what we call a T template. And this is actually a T template as well. And what T template means, anytime you see the letter T in front of your template, the name template, then it means that that's a traditional size template, and you have to cut it out to the exact size of the shape, all right? Now, it's just think of traditional template sizes when you're doing traditional piecing, and that's why we put that extra T in front of there. When I'm actually cutting these out, I'm still going to cut them out just a little bit bigger because I can actually do the final cut right on that line after I get all my fabric stacked underneath it. So we're just going to start, and we're going to move outside that line just a little bit. And if you do make a cutting mistakes, remember we have Scotch tape. It's really easy to repair it at this time. And I like to just stack my templates in the order in which I'm cutting them out. And I don't like to cut through more than one page at a time. You're never going to have 2 pages of templates that are identical because you only need one template to do 8 pieces. So we're just going to set that aside. We're going to clean off our paper. And now we're going to take the next set of templates here. Now we still, as we're reading this, we still have 2 of them here that we call T templates, which means they're traditional size templates. And then we have what we call a template layout sheet. And the template layout sheets, what they are is they're a whole series of templates grouped together so that you can stack your fabric underneath it and cut a whole bunch of pieces at one time. It really saves you hours of cutting. So we're going to cut our individual templates out first. Okay, something I see a lot of my beginner students do is when they're cutting it out, they leave way too much paper along the outside edge. They just kind of rough cut everything, but they leave too much. And you need to get these down to as close to the size as you can without cutting right on the line. Because when we put them on the fabric strips are already pre-cut, and we don't want to have to go back through and cut twice. And if you don't get them cleaned off the first time when you're cutting, then you're going to have to go through and do all your cutting over again. So you're going to waste a lot of your effort. So just make sure you're cutting them out. And I know it takes a little bit of time, but this is the reality of working with templates. We have to cut them out. Okay, the next 3 templates are all what we call template layout sheets. So again, I'm just on a template layout sheet. I usually just cut right on the line because I know it's going to fit right onto my fabric strip, and there won't be any excess. There's normally not excess fabric around them to adjust for the width of it. So just cut them right on that black line like that, if it's a template layout sheet. And we're going to cut this one. Okay, this template here is just a little bit different than everything else. Notice how it has these dark, big dash lines on there. Basically what we've done is we've taken a couple templates, and sometimes we'll take a whole series of templates and put them around in a box with a dash line. And then all you have to do is just take that box and put them onto your strips as you go. So if you see something in these large dash lines, don't cut them individually apart, just leave them together as a big layout sheet. And we do it a lot when we're working with our background fabrics, because then we can set up the grain line and position a whole sheet of paper to fit onto one stack of fabric. Okay, so now we have all of our templates done, and if we read our instructions, it'll actually tell us what bags to put our templates into. What I like to do is just set them aside and actually pull them out in order and put them onto my fabrics, and then after I get all the cutting done, then I sort them and put them with the bags. And the reason why is because sometimes you'll have a template like this one, and these pieces may go into two different bags, and so if you put them in the templates in the bags now, then you're looking for that piece, trying to figure out where that is. So I like to just set these aside and work through my fabric. Okay, so the other thing that we have our templates and our papers cut out now. So the other thing we need to look at is inside of your pattern, you actually have a whole group of your template sheets here, right? Those template sheets, actually, if you look, it tells us that we want to put those into bag AB2. So I like to just call my bags. I don't like to say AB all the time, so I'm just going to refer to this as bag 2 and bag 1. And these template pieces actually go into bag 2, because bag 2 is going to include all the information for our applique, right? When you started this, there was instructions about cutting out all of your fabrics. So you should have all of your fabrics pre-cut. So we're gonna start sorting all of the templates to go with our fabric pieces at this time, all right? With our fabric pieces, we have everything in order. If you cut according to the Quiltster instructions, you're gonna have your fabric AB1, AB2, AB3. We have our AB4 pieces here. We have our AB5. I'm just double checking here. And then we should have AB6 pieces. So what I wanna do now is actually go through and place the template pieces with my fabric, all right? So AB1 says I need template number 1 and template number 3. So I'm gonna go through and I just wanna look to see what pieces they are. And if I go to my instructions down here, I can actually visually see what those pieces are. And that happens to be this template and this template. So now what I'm gonna do is just fold these together like that and move those to the bottom of my pile. Then we're going to go to AB2, and it says we need template layout sheet number 2. And if I just visually flip this over here, I can see that this is template layout sheet number 2. So we're gonna place that into our stack. Then we're going to go to the next one, which is AB3, fabric AB3. And it's template 8, it's T template A2 and A3. So we need to look through here. This is an A3, and this is T template A2. So now we have those together. Then we're gonna go to fabric AB4, and we have 2 fabric colors for AB4. And AB4 says I need T template A4. So we're going to take my T template A4 and put that one with this. Then we're gonna go to the next one, and this is AB5, and it says we need T template A5. I like to sort all of this out, because if I get interrupted and I have to leave, then I have to start all over trying to sort stuff. So it's really nice to be able to sort the templates at this point. All right, the next thing it's going to tell me to do is AB6, T template A1. The A1 template is removed from bags A2. So if you already put these and sorted them into bag, you're going to find this template in your bag A2 at this time. All right. So this is my background fabrics, and instead of putting it in A1, we're going to set it into A2, and then we'll move it all back into A2. And it's just because we want to keep these pieces separated for the applique. So we have everything stacked. Now we're going to start our actual cutting. So we're going to start with the very first piece. And I'm going to look at my cutting instructions, and I'm going to pull my labels off at this point. Then we're going to read our instructions, and it tells us right here, we use a product called a repositionable glue, and I'll show you what it looks like. You can buy this in any office supply store. And what it does is we put it on the back of the template pieces, and then you let it dry on there for about 45 seconds. And then you can actually take those templates, and the sticky stuff from the glue actually sticks to the paper, and you can move your template pieces from one stack of fabric to the next if you need to. So it makes it really easy to reposition something. In my instructions here for fabric AB1, it tells me that we need to open our fabric strips. And we should have 4 6.5-inch fabric strips if we cut according to Quiltster. And if you don't cut according to Quiltster, then you're just going to read that and you're going to cut those 4 pieces. So we're going to open these. When I say open the strips and stack them right side up, it means you're going to open them so that everything is 42 inches. So many of our templates are directional templates when you're working with paper piecing, that you don't want to get caught cutting things with wrong sides together, because what it'll do is it'll make your template pieces all backwards on your paper. So really pay attention and make sure everything is stacked right side up. The other thing I'm doing right now is, this is kind of a directional fabric, so I'm trying to make sure that all of my directional lines are going in the same direction. And then we're going to take our last piece. I'm going to stack it on here, just like this. Then I'm going to look at the little picture, and I know you can't see the whole thing, but I'm going to move it over here now. And there's a picture on your, in your instructions that's going to show you how this is set on here. And we're going to actually take this, and we're going to put the repositionable glue, and just put 2 or 3 lines on the back side of it. You don't have to butter it. And you're going to let that dry for a second. And then you're going to place this on here. And now the nice thing about this is that we can actually just flatten this template. We don't have to go to the ironing board. And then we're going to take, and it says we need to cut 8 pieces. Well, I have 4 pieces of fabrics stacked here, so I'm going to make my first cut. Then, because this is sticking, I can just actually lay this right on here like this, and I don't even have to move the template off. And now I have my 8 pieces. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and cut these apart right now because we're gonna do a paper piecing. But if I was not going to start paper piecing, I would actually take these, put my paper clips, and I'm gonna put a paper clip on each one of these sections right here. So this is a section. Okay. And I would put this right back into the bag. So it tells me that this goes into bag. When I read to the end of that, it goes into bag A1. So I would slip this in my bag. And I like to get everything cut like this and just put it in the bag. And right before we start our paper piecing, then what we'll do is just cut the pieces for the ones that we're going to be working on. And it keeps you from having a whole bunch of pieces cut apart inside your bags. And it makes it a lot easier to figure out what pieces go with each of the papers. So anyway, I'm just going to set this aside right now, and I'm going to finish the cutting, and then we'll come back and we'll finish cutting those apart. The next piece it tells me I have to put on there is this one. So again, we're going to put our repositionable glue. This isn't a glue step, it's actually just a kind of like a sticky note where you can pick it up and take it off when you're done with it. I'm just going to put this, and then we have to have 8 pieces of this, so we're just going to cut right along that line. Notice that I don't have to worry about it being cut accurately. And then we're going to flip this over like that. And then I'm just going to come over here and do a straight cut along that piece as well. I don't need to trim off all of this extra stuff right now. We're going to put our paper clips on it. And we'll come back and do the trimming when we're ready to work with those pieces. Okay, so we're going to go to the next one. We're going to move down our whole stack like this. Now, I'm not going to make you guys sit here and watch me do all of the cutting on all of these pieces. So I'm only going to video the parts in which you need to pay attention to. Now, here is a place where your repositionable glue is really nice to have, because we're going to have to cut lots of these little pieces. It says in our instructions that we have to open our 1/7" strip, and then we're going to take our template and we have to have a whole bunch of, make a whole bunch of cuts for it. Cut 8 pieces matching the size of the template layout sheet. So I like to take this and I look at my picture, because if it's a really tight fit on there, then it's going to show right to the edge. If you have some cutting room, then I like to give myself a little bit more cutting room as I go. I don't have to be as careful with the cutting on my pieces. But if it comes right out to the edges on this graphic, that means you're going to have to pay a little bit more attention to how closely you cut these. All right. We have some play room on this piece. Just put the glue back on our glue stick here. And so then I'm just going to cut, and I can just take the pieces and just keep cutting as I go. Now, if I want to speed it up, I could actually cut this way, because this is just a solid color fabric, so it doesn't have a right or a wrong side to it. If I have fabrics with a right or wrong side, I'd cut them individually, because there's a good chance that we would probably have some direction or grain line issues of it not showing up. If you have wrinkles in something, you probably should go in and press that out. Okay, the next piece we're going to actually cut is one of our tea templates. So I actually do want to go through this because a lot of people don't understand what the difference is. So I've already I've got my stack of fabric here. It says that we have to stack 8 pieces all facing right side up, all right? And then it tells me that I need to position both templates. I have an A2 template and an A3 template. And I already put my repositionable glue on the back of it. And I like to put a little bit more on these because we don't want these to move at all when we start cutting. And we're gonna make sure that your stack is stacked as closely as you can to being accurate, because you don't have a lot of playroom here, and we need to make sure that template's on there correctly, okay? After I get the first one on, then I'm just gonna take and move this and cut. I have plenty of room, so I'm just gonna cut and move this out because I have 8 pieces underneath there. And then we're just gonna make sure that this stack is all stacked evenly, my fabric. And we're gonna take our next piece, and we have to set it on here like this. Now, I already pressed all of my fabric because when you press your fabric in a stack, they stick together a lot better, all right? So we did the pressing on it. We've got these stacked really nice. And then I'm gonna come in here. And so this is my leftover fabric. I like to take and clip my leftover fabrics aside and actually put them back into the bag that we're going to be putting all these pieces in. That way when I make a mistake, I don't have to look all through the house or the office to try to find all the pieces. It's all right there. And it's easy to go in and fix a mistake if we have a little bit of fabric there. So I've got this glued on there. It's not going to move from my very top piece. So we're going to get a few paper clips ready, and we're going to take our very first cut here, and we're going to cut this end right here. Okay. Now, then I'm going to just kind of rotate this just a little bit, and I'm going to place my ruler. And I really like these small rulers when I'm doing precision cutting. And this is a Creative Grids one, so it has a little bit of that Creative Grid sticky stuff there. It just holds on. It's a gripper, they call it. And we're going to hold this down just like that. And then we're carefully going to rotate this. Now, if you can put this on another board and actually work on a board, you don't have to touch the fabric when you're rotating it. And then we're going to cut this end off. And then we're going to come over here, and there's a little cut there that we have to make. And then we have our last big cut here. Okay, so I'm cutting through 8 layers of fabric. Now notice that on the ends we have these 2 little corners that need to be trimmed as well. You want to make sure to trim those now because those are smart corners, and it makes it a lot easier to assemble your pieces because everything fits right along the edges when you start sewing your pieces together. So we're going to cut our smart corners. And then when I get it all done, I like to put 2 or 3 paper clips on that so that these pieces stay nice and flat and straight for me. And then I set them aside, all right? You don't need to watch me cut the next one. I'll come back and cut that later. The next templates in here are also tea templates, so we'll move past those. And then we're going to get back to this very last template, and I want to show you how I set these up. This is for my applique. And this piece of fabric is cut at 20 inches, and we're gonna pull this little label off of it. And you're gonna wanna go do some ironing on this because we need to work with the whole piece, and we have a fold, and anytime you work with fabrics that have a fold, it's really hard to get this stuff out. So what I want to do is take you to the iron, and I'm going to show you a product that I use to get all of this out so that we have a really nice flat piece of fabric. This product I'm using is called an Acorn Precision Piecing product, and I'll actually have them show you guys, give you a full picture of this on your, when they set up the video so that you can find this product. But if you'll actually take this, it has a little pin, it's like a pin, and I can actually take and run it right on these little wrinkles. And these don't come out very easily when you're working with batiks. But if I just take and run these right along these creases here, then when I take my iron and I dry this, those come out just perfectly flat. Now, Acorn also has a spray starch as well that you can actually spray onto your fabric, the whole thing, and it will come out. But I really like the pin for doing just where those creases are. And once it's dry, I don't have those creases anymore. And then we're going to move it right here to the center. And in the 30 years that I've been sewing, I don't think I've ever found a product that does what this one does for me. And I absolutely fell in love with it. See how nice and flat that is? You no longer know where the center fold was in your piece. Okay, we're working with the fabric AB6 and with the template for our baskets and applique pieces. And this is called our background fabric. I've already put the repositionable glue on the back. I've got 2 layers of my fabric stacked that I've pressed together, okay? And we're gonna just turn the page and we're gonna look. I don't know if you have to turn the page, but my instructions told me I had to. And I'm gonna look to see the way it's set up on here. And I have plenty of room here to cut, and I can do a rough cut on these. And I need to cut 8 pieces, all right? So we're gonna take our ruler here, and I'm gonna come outside here about probably 1/4 of an inch because I have plenty of room on this fabric, okay? And then I want to come over here and we're going to cut this side as well. So we have 2 pieces there. We're going to straighten up our fabric again. This fabric has a tendency to move when you start cutting. Then we're going to take this piece and we're just going to flip it over and lay it up here against this edge like this. And then we're going to cut 2 more pieces. Okay? And now we're going to flip it like this. Lined up there, and this is going to give us 2 more pieces, so we're setting at 6 now. And then we're going to get our last piece. Looks like my fabric slid just a little bit underneath there, so I need to straighten it out. Okay, so now that I have this cut, then we're going to get a little bit bigger ruler. We're going to place this right along that edge. Then we're going to forget the curve for right now. We're going to finish doing all of our straight line cuts. I'm going to come up and I'm going to cut the tips. Okay, to do the curved piecing, we're going to use this curved ruler, and it's a ruler that we actually designed and used for one of our other patterns, the dinner plate dahlia. But the thing that's cool about it is it's actually got just a little bit of a curve to it, so you can actually take this and then just use this to rotate, and it's easy to cut around those curves. When you're working with a straight ruler trying to do this, you can't get enough of a cut and you end up with a real jagged cut. We have a couple different rulers that have a curve like that we work with. One of the rulers that we have is called a Creative Grids Wave Ruler, and it has a curved edge. And then we also have this ruler that's called the Curved Diamond Ruler, and you can purchase that one through us. We're going to go over the cutting instructions for accent fabric AB4A and AB4B, okay? So this template here, we actually cut it down in 2 colors. So in Quiltster, if you use 2 colors here, then it's going to come up and tell you you need an A fabric and a B fabric. So you're going to have 2 of those, right? Anytime you're working with 2 fabrics for the same template, 2 or more fabrics, let's say, you want to stack them in order. So you need to give each one of them a letter, A, B, C, D, as it's going down, depending on how many fabrics you have. Okay, I've already glued this one on with my repositionable glue, and just to show you, see, I can pull this off. And then I can actually place it right back on there, just like a little sticky note, okay? And when I pull that off, all of that sticky stuff on the back stays with the paper. It doesn't stay on the fabric, right? So on this one, I have to be able to put one template this way, and then I have to rotate it and put another template right into this area. And I have to get, I have to cut 4 from each fabric. So if you look at the picture in your cutting instructions, it's a little bit trickier to work with because you're only going to be able to cut 1 piece at a time, and then you have to rotate it and get that other one. But your cutting is going to have to be pretty accurate in order to get this space. You can't just cut a whole bunch of excess. So I've got this lined up as close as I can to this border here, or to the edge of the fabric, the raw edges. And I'm just going to double check this and make sure that my fabric is stacked right. And then I'm going to place my ruler right along that straight line. And I'm going to cut. Now on this piece, I actually can lay the next one down right along that edge if I'm careful. And we can get that piece lined up there, like this. And now we're gonna take this, and these are T-templates, so I'm gonna move it back just a little bit. Okay. And then I'm gonna cut again. And then I'm gonna take this edge here. I'm going to cut this corner off. Come over here and cut this one off. So this gives me 2 of my pieces, and now I have to pull this template off. And we're going to do a second cut on it. And the reason I didn't cut all 8 pieces at the same time is because I only have one template, and I have to be pretty accurate with that cutting. And then we're going to take those pieces. We're going to put some paper clips on them. And set them to the side. Now for T-template A5, the cutting is exactly the same as it was as A4, so I'm not going to make you watch me cut these pieces. Okay, I have all of my template pieces cut. So now what I like to do is go back and get these set up and sorted the right way for the bags, okay? So when we're going through this, if we look at the template A1, I'm just gonna go back through my instructions and look, and it tells me that these go into bag A1. So I'm just gonna set them right here for bag A1. Then we're gonna go to fabric, and this is an A1 bag. Then we're going to go to fabric AB2, and that's these pieces. And it tells me that these go into bag A1. Then we go down to fabric AB3, and that's these pieces. And these go into bag A1. And then we go to fabric AB4 and AB5. And both of them go into bag A1 as well. Okay, so now I have everything in my bag A1 right here, okay? And I'm just gonna set that aside. And then we're going to come to this piece, and this one actually tells us to put this in bag A2. So we're gonna fold this piece up and put it into bag A2. All right, so we're gonna set A2 aside. And now we're gonna go back, and because we're gonna start our paper piecing, we're gonna complete some of the cutting on these pieces. So remember I told you earlier that I like to leave them together like this until I'm ready to start paper piecing. Then I come back and continue, because sometimes this will sit in a bag for 3-4 weeks before I have a chance to get back to it, and they're gonna be a lot nicer like this than they are when you have individual template pieces. So we're gonna cut all of these apart. We're gonna start with this one, and we're gonna go to cut line 1 and find my ruler here, And on your papers, you're gonna have it where it says cut line 1, cut line 2, cut line 3, and cut line 4. And on occasion, you'll find where we'll have a mistake where it'll say something like cut line 1, cut line 1, cut line 1. Don't worry too much about it. We just missed it in the process of printing them. And just find a cut line and you start cutting. And what the idea is that you cut continuously. So on these, I'm just going to start here with section 1. And actually section 2, I'm going to find my last section and my first section. And I'm going to start with section 8. And I'm going to cut. That way I can stack these in reverse order. So that's for section 8. And this is my section 6. I'm going to stack that. And now we're going to go to section 4 on the last cut line there. And now we have these stacked in reverse order for me. All right. Now we're going to pick up this one. And this one has cut line 1 through 4. And so I'm going to start on cut line 1. And if you have all of these paper clips, if you actually pick up your out-of-quarter ruler, this lip, it's just the right size, and you can lay that right down on that cut line, and the ruler doesn't wobble on it over those paper clips. Okay, so now that I have these cut, now I'm going to find the largest section, and this is section 9, this is section 7, 5, 3, and 1. And again, notice that when I put these up, I want to make sure my sew sides are all facing away from me. And the first section does not have a sew side. So now we're going to take these pieces and put them right here. Now we're going to take this piece, and this one's going to require a little bit additional cutting. So notice that I'm going to slice on cut line 1 first. And then we're going to go over here, and it says to cut on, this is actually cut line 3, but I'm going to cut it anyway, because it doesn't matter if I cut out of order on some of them. And this little point right here, I'm not even going to worry about that because I don't need to. It's still going to fit underneath there, my pieces. So I'm just going to leave that like that. Then on this one, what I need to do here is, this is cut line 2, which is a curve. And the rest of it, we leave that piece on there. But we have to cut this curve out because that's my sew side. So I'm going to grab my curved ruler, and I'm just going to start cutting along that inside curve. Okay. And if it's not perfectly cut, it's going to be okay because we're doing paper piecing, but we just need to have a little bit of that. Now, something else I want to bring to your attention on this particular piece is you're going to see these little teeny lines here. Because this is curved paper piecing, we're going to have to clip this curve just a little bit. And if we wait and clip it right before we get ready to do the curved piecing, that's fine. But I just want to show you that when you're clipping, it's a lot easier to clip on those lines if you leave the paper on them. Plus, you're not going to clip too far. So if I actually take these and clip, I can just clip about halfway on those, because I don't want to clip into my seam allowance. If I remove the paper and try to clip, then I have to try to figure out and judge, and every one of them is cut just a little bit different at that point. All right? So we have all of our stuff cut and ready to stack. We do need to sort a few pieces on this. So we have these pieces are just fine. And these pieces are the ones where we had the 2 colors. And so what I like to do is pull the template off of it and restack these into 2 groups. And my A fabric is actually my dark one. So when I restack, I'm gonna have the four dark pieces, which are my A fabric, and then I'm gonna have the four light pieces, which are my B fabric on the bottom. Now, it really doesn't matter which one is A and B. It's just that you want to be consistent throughout all of your fabrics. So when I stack these, I'm going to do the same thing. I'm going to make sure that my dark fabrics are on the bottom. If I had 3 or 4 colors, I would want to make sure that both stacks were stacked with the same colors in the same order. So we're going to take these pieces. So now I have on the bottom, I have my light fabrics, and on the top I have my dark fabrics. Okay, so now what we're gonna do is we have to stack all of this in our stacking order. And in your instructions, there is a place in your instruction that tells you the stacking order, and you always start with the largest section number on the bottom. And so the largest section number here, this is section 11, and I believe section 11 is the largest number. Okay, so we're going to put section 11 on the bottom, and there I'm going to put my sew side away from me. And then we're going to find section 10, which that's an 8, that's a 9. Here's section 10 right here. So my sew side is this edge. So I'm gonna move my paper clip, and I'm gonna actually trim that sew side right along the edge of the paper. There we go. So that piece is gonna sit there just like that. Now we're gonna find section 9. This is section 9. Then we're gonna find section 8. Stack it like this. Then we're going to go back and find section 7. And we're going to find section 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. So these pieces right here are my T templates, okay? And the T templates are actually going to be sewn on after we get the paper piecing. So at this point, we're just going to take our T templates and fold them up and put them back into our bag, number 1. And now we're ready to start our paper piecing. Okay, we're going to start with the foundation paper piecing. We've already marked the back side of our papers, so I want to have the one that I marked the full way on the top, all right? And then I'm going to have the rest of them underneath. That way when I pick up the first one, I'm going to grab my first piece, and the very first piece of fabric, if you look, there's a shape there. That shape is actually identical to the shape that we drew on the back when we traced the back side of the paper, all right? So the very first piece, when you put it on, you have to turn your pieces upside down, all right? So that you have the wrong side of the fabric facing up. When you're working with batiks, sometimes that's hard to see which way it is, but if you leave the template on the top, then you'll know, just flip them over like this, all right? So we have wrong side up. I'm working with a directional fabric, and if I don't flip these over, then I'm going to end up with my direction going one direction, and then on all the other pieces it's going to go the other direction. So it's important that you always work with the wrong side on the very first piece. So we have this flipped over now. Now we're going to actually, if I look at my template piece here, I can actually go to a light table if I have a light table, or go to the window. And you're going to match this piece up to the section. Let's see, we got to find section 1 there. So we're going to match it up. And you can see through the paper if you have a light table and know exactly where that piece is supposed to fit, because it's going to match on the back side and the front side. once I know that position, then I can actually pick up my fabric piece and I can lay it right on back onto the paper like that. And because I cut all my papers out very close to the edge, I pick up my next paper to find section 1. I'm going to reach for my glue stick, if we can get the lid off of it. There we go. And I use Yoo-hoo because Yoo-hoo sticks really nice to the paper and the fabric, okay? And it's quite a bit less expensive than any other types of fabric glues. So for paper piecing on the very first piece, I really like the Yoo-hoo. And all we have to do is just barely touch that. We don't want to butter the back of it, just a little bit of glue, just to hold it temporarily to the fabric. Then we're going to pick up the next piece. We're going to match that up the same way. And we're going to stick this one right on top of it in the same location. So all I'm doing is playing a copycat with each piece. There we go. So now we have the fabrics on all 8 pieces, as you see, and everything's identical, right? Now I'm going to take the first piece, we're going to set it right here in the center, and you're going to find where it says line 1, and you're going to place your fold template. And my fold templates have a whole bunch of marks and lines on them, because then I don't lose them. So I just cut up old template plastic that I've been messing with and use that as a straight edge, and then I fold my foundation paper back over the edge. You have your add a quarter ruler, which has a lip on the back side, and you're going to place that lip down. And notice that my hands are holding the plastic and the paper out here. So I like to cut my fold templates bigger than my add a quarter ruler. Now I just put the add a quarter down, and all I have to do is just hold on to it with my finger, and we're going to trim our 1/4 inch seam allowance. All right. Then we're going to set this piece up here like that, and we're going to repeat this 8 times. So now we have all 8 pieces stacked and ready to go. Now we're going to pick up section 2. Notice here's my sew side. Pull the paper clip off, set the template aside. My fabric is facing right side up. And I'm going to find where I marked these 2 lines right here and put my finger on both. And then I'm going to just line up the raw edges and make sure that I'm centering that template piece between those 2 pieces. All right. Then we're going to take the next one. We're going to place it and line it up. And we're going to do the same thing. And again, now I'm going to actually show you, this is the one I traced. And so see this area right in here? This is what I'm covering in with that section. So we're going to take that, we're going to place it back down there like this. And now you can see our stack is nice and straight. We're done with this glue. So we're going to put the lid back on. And now we're going to use this glue pen. And this is just a fabric glue pen. There's several companies that put it out, Sewline, Pons and Porter, and there's a few other companies out there that have them as well. All of the glue that they use for the inside is the same type of refillable glue. So Now what I like to do, because when I'm working with something like this where the paper's a lot bigger than my fabric, the fabric has a tendency to move in the process of picking it up. So I like to open the seam up, and I just put a little bit of glue and glue those fabric pieces together along the raw edge. And it doesn't take a lot of glue, just a touch. We also have fabric here that's really showing a difference between contrast. We have a real light and a real dark fabric. And sometimes if you're not careful about the way you position your fabric, you'll end up with a shadow. So anytime you have two pieces of fabric, a light and a dark fabric, and you're doing paper piecing, there's a very simple rule to remember. If the light is on the bottom, and you overlap the dark, you're going to end up with a shadow. So anytime the light is on the bottom, you want to offset the top piece, the darkest piece, just a little bit so that you can see just a little sliver of the white fabric along the edge of the dark. If the dark is on the bottom, you will not have a shadow, because in paper piecing, it's always going to be pressed in the direction in which you will not create a shadow. So you only have to remember that when light is on the bottom. Okay, so now all my pieces are glued on. So when I go to pick this up, see, I don't have to worry about those pieces falling apart. Now we're gonna start with the paper piecing. Okay, I like to stack all of my pieces when I'm doing the stacking on a board so that it's easy for me to go from a table over to my sewing machine without messing up the stack, okay? So if you just have some kind of a board that you can work off of, it works great. Then I'm gonna take these pieces and set them up the way I want them to go through the machine. Okay, we're gonna start doing our paper piecing. What you wanna do is set your stitch length at about somewhere between 1.5 and 1.9, depending on what your machine you're sewing with. Okay, you want it to be a tight stitch, but if you get it too tight, then it's gonna tear the paper in the sewing process. So you're gonna have to test that a little bit if you're new to paper piecing. On my machine, I like to go down to about a 1.9, and that's a pretty tight stitch for me. So now we're gonna pick up the very first paper. We're gonna open the paper before we go through, and we're gonna find where it reads line 1, and we're gonna sew on line 1. We're gonna start before line 1 starts, and we're gonna end past line 1. So it's okay to sew beyond and start before the line is at where it's printed on your paper. Okay, now we're gonna just start sewing. Okay. So I like to put my needle down. It's just my preference. A lot of people don't like having their needle down. Okay, now because I don't have a thread cutter on here, then I'm going to actually pull this off to the side. If you have a thread cutter, you would touch the thread cutter and it would actually cut the thread right there for you. But what I have to do is pull it to the side like this, and then I lay my next piece in here. We sewed just past the line. So my next little tip about paper piecing here is we're going to lift the needle, we're going to pull it to the side, and then we start again. The reason you have lines is so that you sew on the line, okay? So if you're sewing so fast that your line is wavy like this, you need to slow down a little bit and just make sure that you stay on that stitch line. The straighter that stitch is, the better your product's gonna look when you're done. Once you get all of the papers sewn together, you're gonna just pick these up and you're gonna cut your thread on both sides and restack it. We have all 8 papers, now we're going to go to the ironing board. We're going to pick the first piece up, we're going to open the fabric, and we're going to press right along that line there. If you have a little bit of steam, the steam works great, then just set it to the side, and then you're going to take the next one. Don't press on top of the other pieces because you're working with newsprint. A newsprint will leave lines on the bottom, on the pieces underneath it, so you want to keep that clean. If you don't want the newsprint on your pressing onto your ironing pad, then put a little white piece of fabric on there and use that to press on when you're working with your foundation papers. Okay, now we have to fold these back and we have to add section 2. So we're going to take the very first piece off the top. We're going to place this flat on our table and we're going to find line 2. We're going to place the fold tiplet down on line 2. I'm going to cut that little thread there. Then we're going to actually fold this back and you're going to bring the fabric with it, so it's going to look like this, all right? Because we've already sewn that fabric to the paper, we have to be able to get that fabric to lay down. So we're just going to grab the fabric and tear it loose from the paper, so it's going to leave a little hole in the paper. That's okay. And then we're going to take our add a quarter ruler and we're going to trim a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Then we're going to set this piece to the side up here and we're going to pick up the next one. We're going to place it on line 2, fold back the fabric and the paper with it, pick up the fabric, tear it loose so that it lays flat, put your add a quarter on, pick up your rotary cutter and trim, and then stack. See, I tore a big hole in it. I'm just fine, I don't care. In the big picture, that's gonna make it easier to pull that paper out of there when we're ready to remove the paper. Okay, now we have our pieces all stacked again. Now we're going to add section 3. We have 1 and 2 are on here. Now we're going to add section 3. We're going to remove this. We're going to pick this template piece up. Now everything is going to be right side up. We don't flip that piece over. It's all right side up. And we're going to find where our 2 marks are at the top and the bottom. And we're going to pick the first piece up. Place it on here. And now we have the dark on the bottom, so we really don't have to worry about any shadowing. And we're just going to keep adding all of our fabric pieces and make sure that we're centered between those 2 lines, that we have fabric on both sides. So I put my finger here, and when I put my hand down, I just lay it right on there like that. Now we're going to grab our glue pen and we're going to glue the raw edges just like we did before. And now we're ready to go back to our sewing machine and add those pieces on. I'm going to finish up the paper piecing up to the point of doing the curved piecing, then we'll come back and show you how to do the curved piecing on that top. we're down to doing the curved piecing. And we do this actually on paper because when you're done, you just trim it to the size of the paper and everything works great for you. You don't have to worry about getting it off-centered or anything coming out the odd size because your seam allowance might be a little bit big because it's going to come out exactly the size of the paper. All right. We still have to put the little base on the bottom, so I'm going to actually do that. And there is a little bit of a trick there. So I'm going to actually just take my ruler and trim off this excess fabric along this edge a little bit. And then we're going to place our fold template on line 9 at the bottom. Now there's a lot of little seams going in through all of that. So we're going to have to fold it back, and then we're going to have to pull each one of those back individually and kind of pull threads out of the way a bit. So we tore our paper where every one of those seams are, and then we're going to put the add a quarter ruler, going to trim, and then we place the little piece right underneath the end there. And when you put this on, you want to make sure that you have your little wings on both sides of your pieces like this. I'm trying to find the camera where you're going to see it, but see how we have a little wing on both sides? That means that our piece is going to go all the way down to the bottom on both sides. And now we're going to open up the paper and we're going to sew that line. Okay, so we have that one done. Now I'm going to actually explain a couple things here to you. I have another one here, and you see this line that I've sewn along here? That's a basting line. And in your instructions and on your foundation papers, on the back, you're going to find this where it says basting stitch line 10. And we're actually going to sew a stitch on there, because that gives us our 1/4 inch seam allowance that we need. Because with paper piecing, when you're using an add a quarter ruler, it has to be a straight line, but we're working with a curve, so we have to do this a little bit different. So I'm going to quickly just show you how to sew that line. I don't worry about it being too tight of a stitch or anything, because I'm going to cut that stitch off in the long run. So all we have to do is just sew on the line. All of our instructions say to do a basting stitch about 2.5 to 2.8. It really doesn't make a difference because we're going to cut it off. Okay, so now I have a basting line on both of these, okay? And I'm going to show you 2 ways. One way, the first way I'm going to show you how to put this curve on is the way the instructions are written. So what it's going to tell you to do now is to come in here, and I'm just going to cut a bunch of these threads off here. And it's going to tell you to fold the paper back, tear each one of these little lines back along that 1/4 inch seam allowance. And what you're going to have to do is kind of just work the paper, and you're going to trim that excess off to clean off that extra fabric. Okay. So now when we flip it up, we still have our basting stitch line there, but we've cleaned off a bunch of that fabric. Now we're going to pick up one of these pieces, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to fold this and find where the center of the paper is. Okay, so now I can see where my center is, and then I'm going to fold this piece right in half like this. And I'm going to line that up to the center. Then I'm going to grab a flower pin and I'm going to pin that so it doesn't move. Right like that. And we're going to grab our fabric glue pin and we're going to lift up our piece and we're going to put some glue right along the inside edge of that basting stitch. And then I'm going to just roll this curve around and glue it along the edge there, okay? So when you kind of see the way it's going to look, I'm just gluing that curve. Then I'm going to do the other side the same way. Be a little bit careful with your glue because you don't want to get it way out past your seam allowance because then you have to wash it off. And we want it to stay between the fabrics where you can't see it. Okay, so now I have that one done, okay? Now, that's the way your instructions are going to tell you to do it. Now I'm going to show you another way you can actually do this. Instead of trimming that off, you can actually take your papers and you can find the center again. Now we're going to take this piece, find the center, and I'm going to lay it right there in the middle. I'm just going to take my glue stick and I'm going to glue my fabric to the center there. And then I'm going to run it the rest of the way along the inside of that basting stitch. Because your basting stitch is actually where you're going to trim when you're all done with this. Okay, then we're going to roll that one. Then we're going to do the other side as well. Okay. Now we have both of those pieces on there. Now we're going to take them both to the sewing machine and we're actually going to line our 1/4 inch foot right along the edge of that basting stitch line. So even though like on this one it's sticking out a ways, you're going to still use that basting stitch line as your guide because that's right where your 1/4 inch is. So I'm going to place this right along the edge there, line my 1/4 inch foot up to the basting stitch line, and then I'm going to start sewing. And I want my needle down so that I can lift my pressure foot every inch or so and move the fabric underneath it so it's flat. So about every inch you're going to pick that up and you're going to readjust your fabric. Otherwise you're going to end up with little folds and pleats. And you just keep pulling that fabric back and adjusting it a little bit. Whoops, get it off just a little bit. I have a knee lift on my sewing machine that I can lift the pressure foot off. Now if you guys don't have a knee lift, you're going to have to lift that pressure foot up either with a button on your machine or just by lifting back like that to get that so that you can work the fabric. Now when I'm done, I'm sewing right on that line, and so you're going to want to flip it over and make sure that you sewed right on where it says line, sew line 11. And now we're going to do the same thing to the second one. Now, a lot of times people will ask me why I don't sew on the paper side of it, which if you flip it over like this, sometimes you can. But the curve on this particular basket, there's too much of a concave cut in that. And so if I tried to sew on this side, I would never be able to work the fabric under it without getting a lot of pleats. So sometimes you have to just look to see what you have to work with and do the best you can. So now we have our basket pieces on here, and I'm gonna go to the ironing board and steam that down. But before I do that, I'm gonna use that pin that I showed you guys earlier, and I'm actually gonna run that right along that curved seam before I hit it with the iron. And that lays that seam flat, and it starches the seam down so it doesn't move. Now we'll take this over to the iron, and we're gonna press it. That gives me just a really nice crisp seam there that I don't have to worry about rolling on me. So this piece is the one that we'd actually trimmed all of that excess off, okay? And now I'm just gonna lay this down, and we're gonna trim all of the fabric off the outside edge. I like to go through and do all of my straight lines first. And then we're going to clip that tip off. And now we're going to find our curved ruler. And I'm going to lay that just along the inside curve there, and I'm just going to adjust the ruler as I cut, so that I always have just a little bit of the ruler right in front of the rotary cutter, and that keeps my fabric from moving. Okay, so now I have this piece trimmed, and we're just going to set it aside, and then I'm going to show you how to trim the other one. Now we're going to do the same thing with this one, but this one's the one where we left all that excess fabric in there. Okay, so we're going to trim it first. Grab our curved ruler. Okay. So now when I look at this, see how I have all of these lines there? Or this fabric that I got to get rid of, and this one I have it all cleaned off. Okay, before I go any further, I have some TRP lines that have to be marked, and since I'm going to end up cutting this paper off to get that basting stitch line off, I need to sew those TRP lines right now, so, or mark them. So I'm going to find a pencil here, and I'm just going to fold back along that line, and I'm going to mark that with this red marking pencil. And I'm going to fold this one back and mark this one. So So when you're working with TRP lines, sometimes you have to mark them and sometimes you have to sew them. And sometimes you have to mark them and then sew them. Okay, this is one of those times when we're gonna mark them and then we're gonna come back and sew them after the fact. Okay, so now I have this one where I have all of this excess, and I'm just going to take my rotary cutter and I'm going to cut just inside of that basting stitch. And now, see how clean it is on the back? And where I've marked my TRP lines, I can come in now and sew right on that red line. Because chances are that red line is actually going to be gone by the time I need those registration lines to sew the next piece. Now on this one, see, I'm still going to come back and I'm going to get rid of all of this excess fabric, because if that was a lighter piece, that's going to shadow through there after you do your quilting. So I like to clean off any of those basting stitches that I sew. I want to get them out of my quilt. So we're going to pull these off. And now I'm just going to go in and I'm going to sew those the two TRP lines right now. When I sew a TRP line, I like to start inside the fabric and then sew out to the edge. The reason why I do it that way is because if I start on the edge, I normally end up with a knot there, and it's hard to pull the threads out after the fact. Now these I am going to increase my stitch length to about a 2.5 to 2.8, depending on your machine. And then I'm just going to sew out to the edge, and then we're going to do the next one. So now I'm going to take a little pair of scissors and we're going to clean those threads off. The reason you want to clean the threads off is it makes it easier when you're ready to pull those out. All you have to do is take a little stiletto and put it underneath there, and the threads come right off. If you leave the threads in, then chances are you're going to have those sewn into your seams as you continue to sew. And now it's going to be hard to get those out. We want that to be as simple as possible when it comes time to sew. There's our basket pieces. So we'll see you in a bit, and we're going to move on. We got to do some applique first. Okay, I am going to teach you guys how to do turn under applique, all right? With the technique that I use, we have to do the applique prior to finishing the basket pieces. So I'm gonna go through the steps of putting together the applique, how to cut it out, how to use the paper that we're using, and then how to put it onto the background pieces for the basket. Now, if you're using the digitized embroidery design, you could have you need to finish your basket pieces, and then the applique is added after you get all of those the basket pieces sewn into the star. So you are actually going to finish all of these pieces, and then after you get them done, you come back and you put the applique, the digitized applique pieces on top. The reason I do the applique first is because I have to sew this into the seam line right here, where when you're doing a digitize, it finishes up all of the satin stitch around it, finishes all the raw edges, and so you can add it after the fact. All right, so in your pattern, you actually should have received 8 sheets of the applique pieces that go onto the basket. And this paper is called Stitch and Peel, and it's a rinse away product that after time, once it's washed, it's gonna break down and become softer and softer and just become part of your quilt. Okay, it has a sticky paper on the top of it that we peel off, all right? And then it sticks right onto the fabric, and I'm gonna show you the process. But when we actually do this, we can offer these a lot cheaper than actually having things pre-cut, because we do this with a laser cutter, and what we do is we leave these little tabs in, so you just get a sheet and you don't have to go through and sort everything out. So what you want to do is, after you get this, you're going to actually take, and you can usually stack 4 pieces and then get in here and just pop those little tabs like that. Now if you don't want to pop the tabs with your finger, if you don't have strong fingernails, what you want to do is take a rotary cutter, and I'm going to have to move my light table. I'll just put a cutting board on it. So I can put my cutting board on there, and then I can grab my rotary cutter, and all I have to do is just touch that in between the lines, and it'll pop all of those. Now if you have a little rotary cutter, which I don't have one with me right at the moment, it's a little bit easier to get into the curves and the tips of it, but all you do is just touch that, and then your pieces will come right out for you. So I got one more on that. So now when I lift this up, my whole stem came out, and I pulled 4 of them out at the same time. That'll save you a lot of time popping each one out individually. Then I like to just take, after I get them all cut out or popped out like that, I like to put a paper clip on them to keep all of the same pieces together, because you're going to notice you have different size leaves here, and sometimes it's hard to figure out which leaf is supposed to be which. Okay, now the other thing you should consider before you start popping all of this out is, in your instructions there's a diagram that tells you what fabrics go onto each one of those little applique pieces. So if you filled out your fabric chart, you can come in and you can write down what that fabric is on these 1 sheets, and then you'll have it on the very top piece, okay? The other thing that helps is, if you think it's going to take you quite a while to get your applique done, you can actually cut little swatches and put a little swatch on the top of each one of these as well, and then you'll remember what color you're using for that particular template piece, right? So that's how we pop everything out, and it works really great, and it's fast and easy. So we're going to set these aside, and I'm going to show you how you put these on. What I do is I just rub my finger along the edge there until I can pull the 2 pieces. And so see how there's paper here, and then this is the sticky part right here, right? So then I'm just going to pull that off, and I'm going to put that sticky down onto my fabric. So the sticky goes on the wrong side of the fabric. So if you have fabric that have a right and a wrong side, you want to put the sticky to the fabric, the back side, and then when we cut it out, it's going to put the right side of the fabric where it needs to be. Okay, so again, I'm just going to show you, just take your finger and roll it along the edge and loosen that edge up, and then you can just put those pieces on just like that. All right, so the next thing we're going to do is show you how to cut these out. And I'm gonna I have some other pieces that are ready to cut out. So I like to use my rotary cutter. You can use your scissors if you want, but I prefer the rotary cutter. It's just a lot faster and it's cleaner. And what I do is I just use my big rotary cutter, and you can use whatever size you want. And I just turn the fabric underneath the rotary cutter. And I want to cut that about 3/16 of an inch, because I want it less than a quarter and more than an eighth, okay? So then I'm gonna get all of these pieces cut like this. And it's very easy. See how I'm just turning the fabric right underneath there? And it's a lot faster, cleaner cut. You don't have near as much fabric fraying along the edges when you use a rotary cutter. And there we go. We have those two little nice pieces set up there. So I have a stack here. So I've shown you how to cut these. Now I have a stack. And there's a few things I need to go through and do several different types here of applique to show you how to work with the really skinny tips on some of the stems. So see, if we look at these, we have skinny tips, and then we have some where we have to do some clipping on the inside, and then these pieces are really easy to work with. So I'm just gonna get my glue stick ready, and then we're gonna start showing you how to do the turn under applique. Okay, ladies, we're gonna do applique. This is probably one of my favorite processes that I do. I love putting applique on quilt, and when we get all of the applique turned under, then we're going to teach you how to do machine applique with the machine. But there's a few things you need to know before you start your applique. I showed you how to trim around the outside pieces, how to put your template pieces on the back side. But now we're going to go over the tools that you need. One is, the first thing you need is a little bowl so that you can put your glue stick in. The next thing you want to do is just get you some of these beautiful little Quiltworx wipes here. And you're going to pull out 3 or 4 sheets of it. And you're just going to fold this up and put this in the bottom of your bowl, okay? Now, when you're not using your glue, you can actually put your glue in there and it'll stay just really moist and it won't dry up for you. The other nice thing I like using the Quiltworx wipes for is when I start getting lots of glue sticking to the outside, and plus sometimes I get it on my hands, I have some wipes sitting here that I can quickly clean my glue stick off, and my hands, and my purple thing, and my scissors, and keep it clean so that it's easy to continue getting our little cuts. So Quiltworx wipes are great, okay? So the other thing you're gonna need is you need one of these glue pens, all right? And then you're going to, it's best to start with some fresh. You're gonna go through these really fast, okay? But I think they're the best pen glue stick that we've ever worked with as far as doing turn under applique. So you pull that lid off, whoops, I didn't mean to do that. And after you pull the lid off, then you attach it to the top of your pen, and then you just screw this down, just keep winding and winding and winding until it stops winding anymore. All right, now we have this pin on, okay? And so, because when you're appliquing, you're not constantly putting the glue cap back on, that's where the bowl's gonna come in really nice, because you'll just set it in there and it'll keep that. And if, just in case you didn't know, the cap actually fits on the end of your pen, so you don't have to keep looking for the cap to find it. Just put it back on the end of the pen and set it in your bowl like that, all right? The little pairs of scissors, the reason you need that is because when you have a curve like this, you need to cut and clip the insides of those pieces. So if your scissors are too big, you end up cutting too far. And I usually will take and do those cuts about every, a little bit more than a quarter. It just kind of depends on how much of a curve that is. And you're just gonna clip. Now I like to do them all at one time, so if I'm making 8 of these, I would actually go through and do all the clipping at one time on those pieces. And then we're gonna flip it around and clip the inside curve on these as well. You don't need to clip it all the way back to the paper, but if you're turning it under and it doesn't seem to want to roll under very easy for you, then just go back and re-clip that piece, right? Now the other thing we're going to use here is a purple thing, and we're going to use the purple thing to do the turn under. All right, some people like to use their fingernails, some people like to use chopsticks. There's lots of different ways you can do it. I like the purple thing because it's flat on one side, and it just fits really nice with my finger. So I'm just going to wipe mine off and get all the rest of the glue off of that. Okay, now we're going to take our glue and we're going to run the glue on the paper and the fabric. And if you're new to turn under applique, you don't want to glue the whole edge. Just keep it glued right before you start, okay? Then you're going to practice turning a circle, just a flat circle on your surface. And I have a glass surface here that I'm using. And then I'm going to fold my piece back, and I'm going to do the first one really fast because I glued the whole thing. And you're just going to watch what I'm doing, and then I'll come back and explain a little bit more. I just like to roll this over, kind of like a pressing. I'm not folding it, it's just rolling it like if I was working with an iron. And I have to roll all the way through that tip so that there's nothing that hasn't been glued along the whole thing, okay? Now I'm going to do this again on another piece and go a little bit slower for you. So I'm just going to quickly clip the inside curve on each one of these. Okay. And then we're going to grab our glue pen. And I'm not going to glue the whole thing because I'm going to go slower for you. So what I'm doing here is I'm going to fold the very first piece over right at the bottom just to get it started. And then what I'm actually doing is I'm rolling this back towards myself, kind of in a circular motion like this. If I just try to fold, I'm going to end up with little folds and pleats in it. So you just have to kind of go slow and get through and get that to where it's actually pressing and laying really flat for you. Then you're going to come in, we're going to put glue all the way up past the tip. Like I said, I'm working on a glass table here, so I don't care if I get a lot of glue on it because I can wipe it off with my Clorox wipes. So see how I'm making that? And it's just this little circular motion that we're working. And when we get to the tip, we're going to fold that tip all the way over so you can kind of see the raw edge on this side. But see how nice and smooth that inside curve is? So now I'm going to take my little scissors and I'm going to clip that piece right there off, that excess fabric off. And then I'm going to grab my glue stick and get that glued right along the edge there. And then I'm going to put my finger right at the edge of the paper and I'm going to fold that tip over all the way up on the paper and then just kind of smooth out that tip. And when I get it smooth, then I'll grab my glue stick again and finish running it down this. And now but see how I'm just, my purple thing is just doing this circular motion there. Okay. And then I'm just going to double press it and make sure that's nice and smooth. Now what you're going to find is you have this little tab sticking out here. And what we want to do is we're going to put your finger right in between it and loosen that up just a little bit. And then you're going to take your blade of your scissors and you're going to lay it right underneath there and clip that off. And now you have this perfect tip on your piece. Okay, we're going to do one more of those like that. I'm going to finish this piece off. So we're going to flip it over and we're going to find that edge and clip that edge off that was raw, that raw edge. And now we're going to put our glue. Get that to fold over properly. And now I'm going to come over here and I'm just going to get my finger between there, the folded edge, and I'm going to lay the blade right down underneath it and flip that off like that. Okay. So now the next piece we're going to do is you're going to find that the flowers are a little bit easier to work with, but we have to turn under both tips. Notice on this one, I did not turn the bottom under on this piece. Now if you're doing the digitized, you're going to turn that bottom under on that piece as well. No, actually there's no turn under on the digitized, so you would just cut right along that edge. On this piece, there again, I did not turn under the bottom because we want that to lay under your pieces, okay? So on this leaf, we have to roll the whole thing under on both ends. Like that. Yep. Now, I've had some people say, well, I like to do all one side and then come back and do the other side. My issue with that is once that glue's dry, it's hard to go in there and try to readjust anything. So if you have to make any adjustments to it, you need to make sure you're doing that before the glue has a chance to dry. Because once it's dry, it's not going to come undone. Now we're going to take this and we're going to clip both ends of my flower tip off. And now I have a perfect point on both ends. All right. So I'm going to do one more piece here for you, and then we're going to show you how to put this onto your background. So I need to do some clipping. These are the tiniest pieces that you're going to be working with as far as the tip is concerned. I'm going to put my glue. And remember, we're gluing not just the paper, but we want glue on the paper and along the edge of the fabric. So I'm going to fold this back. And then we're just going to work that all the way so that we have a folded edge along the whole side. Then we're going to come in and clip that tip off. I'm going to get glue down the edge there. And then I'm going to fold this back over the top of my finger. Get that started right along the paper. And again, we're not going to fold under the bottom of the stem. Then we got to flip this over again. And we got that tip there. And we're going to clean that off. Got a little bit too much glue on my scissors now. And we're going to make sure that that's nice and smooth along there. Okay. So now we're going to get ready. We're going to sort this all out. and we're going to show you how to attach it to build the whole pieces. Okay, so these are our background pieces that we cut out earlier, and before we go any further, I want you to notice that there's some TRP lines right here, okay? Now, this is a light piece of fabric. It's a batik, and we may not need these TRP lines, so what I like to do is I like to go in and sew through all 8 fabrics, and then I pick them out and it leaves little holes in there. And so I'm going to do that really quick, and then we'll pick it out and you'll see the little holes. Now the problem with doing it that way is if this is at the beginning of my quilts and I'm going to be ironing this piece a lot, then those holes are going to go away and I'm not going to be able to see them. So I might be better off in the long run to come back and sew those, okay? But I'm going to show you that trick first, right? So I'm going to go to my machine. And you don't really need to see me sew these if you can't see. And I'm just going to quickly stitch the whole group together. This is just a lot more accurate way to get these marks. And the reason for the TRP lines in the big picture is when I start to assemble, I'm gonna have where this sews into another piece, there's gonna be a line, and I'm able to just line those 2 lines up, and I don't have to worry about trying to fit seams or know where everything's at, because when we do a paper piecing, a lot of times you don't have another seam to match something up to because of the way we design our lines. Where in traditional piecing, you would always have this would sew on to something else that was the same size. But in paper piecing, that's not always the case. Okay, so we've just found that over the years, if we put these TRP lines, it gives us guides to sew all of our main pieces. So now that I have those stitches on there, I'm actually going to come in and I'm going to take my little scissors here and just kind of pull the threads out. And if I had my stiletto, those would have been out already, because on the stiletto, you just slide the whole thing under and then it just pulls the threads up. You lift on it and it pulls all the threads up. The scissors are a little bit too big to give that, but this gives you a little bit of the idea of what I'm talking about. So now I can pull that out. Okay, I am going to show you guys some really cool stuff right now. We need a few things here to do this, all right? But this is my repositionable glue. These are the pieces that we pulled out of bag A2, or I think it was B2, all right? It's the applique. And remember, we have repositionable glue on the back side of this paper already, okay? So we pulled the basting stitches out. We're just gonna take these pieces and set them up here. And because this has repositionable glue on it, we can lay it right down on top of this table. And don't worry, because repositionable glue wipes right off with your little Clorox things, all right? So when we're done, we can just wipe it all off and we're good. Then we're gonna take just a little bit of our repositionable glue and we're just gonna put just a little bit on the top here. And that's all you need, not a lot, okay? So now we're gonna pick up our first piece of fabric and we're gonna lay it right on top of this paper. And then I'm gonna turn my light table on one more notch up. And I can see all of my pieces. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna look at the ones that go on the bottom, and my little flowers are the first ones that go on the bottom. And I have a sample here that I can follow that has all of my color on it. So isn't that pretty? So we're gonna just set this up here so I can see where to put my colors, so I have them all. This piece is gonna go right here. We have to have some Roxanne's basting glue, and we're just gonna take the Roxanne's basting glue and we can just put it right on the fabric. And I'm gonna put just a little bit on the back of this, and I'm gonna put that piece right in position. Then we're gonna take the next color, which is this one, and we're gonna put, and you might end up going through 2 or 3 of these little bottles of Roxanne's basting glue as you're going through the applique process. As well, you're probably gonna go through about 5 or 6 of those little refill pieces. So that piece is this one. And then we're gonna come in. Now I don't wanna put this, I keep this glue away from the edges because where I applique, I don't want my needle hitting those little chunks of glue. So I always make sure that it's away from the edges. It also allows me to lift up the pieces if I have to hide a thread or something underneath my pieces when I do it, when I'm doing my applique. So now that I have those in position, now we're gonna grab these pieces right here, and I have 2 different types of stems, and I'm gonna just run this glue right down between my lines, and then I'm gonna put a little bit of it on the tip there and right down the middle of this. And then I'm gonna position that right matching those lines, and notice that it's gonna come underneath this piece like that. Now I'm gonna come in and put the next stem on like this and figure out where that goes. And then we're just gonna go right down between it. And then I'm gonna reinforce it and put just a little bit right in the middle of this, the back of the stem, and position that. And then we're gonna do the next one. You should be able to find these light tables and the glue pen, or the Roxanne's basting glue at most fabric shops. Probably carry these. If not, I know that a lot of our certified shops carry them, and we carry them as well. So you guys, if you need to find a light table and you want one, these are awesome light tables because they also have a cutting board that comes with them. And you can actually use it as a cutting table. They're also small enough that if you want to take them to classes, they're easily transported to classes as well, especially if you keep the boxes that they come in. Okay, so now I'm going to start putting my next pieces, and these pieces here are going to cover the others. So I'm just going to come in and grab these tips where they overlap and make sure I have glue on those tips. And I'm going to bring this back all the way in like this and lay that on. And then we're going to take our next big fat leaf here, and we're going to put that in position. And now we have our final leaf, the big long center one that ties everything together. Now on this one, notice that you have the raw edges down here on the bottom. Well, this needs to be in the seam allowance. So when you place this, you want to start down here at the bottom and make sure that you get that matched up to the bottom of your curve here. I'm going to move my board up because I'm not sure you can actually see what I'm talking about. Right here. So you want to make sure that that's down at the bottom. Push that into position, and then just keep this rolling up, just like that. Now we're going to just pick this piece up like that, and how slick is that? And now we're going to go hit this with an iron. We're going to flip it over to the back side and iron all of that Roxanne's basting glue until it's dry. So it's pieces. Lay it down on your ironing board so that the applique is down, and then you're just going to take your hot iron and just start pressing on that and to get that glue dry. And once that glue's dry, those pieces won't come off. But the good thing about it is, when you're doing your applique, we didn't glue the edges down, so if we have to lift them off just a little bit, we can. And once that glue's dry, those pieces won't come off. But the good thing about it is, when you're doing your... And now we have our piece sitting here. I'm just going to move this one over. See how nice that is? It's so perfect. And now we're ready to actually sew these two pieces together. Okay, now that we have this all done, I'm going to actually mark these bottom basting stitches just with a pencil, because I really don't need to sew them. Just going to get them marked there at the bottom. And now when I put these pieces together, I will know exactly where those have to fit. Okay, so you're going to match these little basting stitches up with the little marks that we put right at the bottom of that piece right there. Then we're going to remove the paper. Now I know there's a lot of instructors out there that say, no, just sew with the paper on, but you can't sew curved seams with the paper on. I personally don't like sewing any seams with the paper, because our machines are actually designed to sew fabric to fabric, not fabric to paper with paper and fabric and all those layers underneath. The feed dogs are really designed to feed the paper or the fabric through your machine. So paper is just a tool to get the accurate piecing in place on a unit. And then you want to pull it off when you're ready to sew it together and treat it with just sew it with fabric. If you have a little bit of paper that stays on the back, it's not a big deal as long as it's a dark piece of fabric. So I don't have to worry about the paper underneath this blue, because it's not going to shadow. But it will shadow through my white places fabric, so I want to make sure that I get all of the paper off of that white. And if you have to get something a little bit wet in order to get rid of the paper, like if you have some glue under there, just take something damp like your little Clorox wipes and just set it on there, and that'll pull that out. Just make sure that it's not a dark fabric, because I don't know if that would pull the color out or not. But there we go. So now we have all of the paper off, except just a little bit of a shadow right here from the glue, which that's fine. Okay, so now I'm gonna actually take and match up my first TRP lines right there. And I'm gonna find a pin, and we're gonna run that pin right down and weave it right down through that spot. Then we're gonna roll this one around and match this one up here. And again, we're just gonna run that through. And if you're wondering why I put the pins in my hair, it just puts a little bit of oil on the pin and makes it go through the fabric better. So now we're going to find my glue stick right here. And this is cut with a smart corner, and it's got a little bit of a corner right there, and it's going to match right up to the corner right here. And I'm just going to glue the raw edges along that curve. So first I'm going to position that so that I have it perfectly positioned, and then I'm just going to push the rest of it together so that I have that glued there. Now we're going to come over to this end. I'm going to put my glue along here, and then I'm going to position that corner, which we call these smart corners. That's going to go right like that. And then I'm going to get that glued down there. And then I'm going to move my pin now and let that relax just a little bit. And then I'm going to pull the rest of this in. Starting over here, my line. And now I have all of the raw edges. Okay, now we're ready to sew a line across there. So I'm going to take a little piece of my newsprint right here. I'm going to just tear this in half. And I'm going to make sure there's nothing sticky on it. So I'm just going to fold it because it might have some repositionable glue, and I don't want that on my machine. So I'm going to start sewing on that paper. I'm going to make sure I have my stitch the length I want. I'm going to set that up at about 2.1 on this curved seam. I don't want to do a tight stitch like if I was doing paper piecing, because I want the feed dogs to pull this through really nice. So by putting this paper on here, now I can just lift my piece up and set it right under there. And it'll pull that through, and I don't have to worry about my needle taking that tip down through that little hole in the machine. It's just gonna sew right over the tip there. And I want to make sure that my needle's down before I start. And then we're gonna do just a perfect 1/4 inch seam allowance. Okay, so the reason for putting the paper under there is it stops that needle from fraying that point as well. So I'm going to actually take the second piece that I have here, and I'm going to put it underneath right here at the end as well, so that it won't move my tip as I'm sewing off the edge of that paper. And then I have a nice perfect point where that's supposed to hit. So now, if you look, you can tell that my seam started right at that point and it ended right on this point. So when I bring this back, that should be a straight line. So what I like to do is take a little bit of glue, and I just put some glue right along the inside of that seam, and I just push that back and get that to glue down along that edge, and that keeps that straight for me along there. And now I have a perfectly straight line. Then we're going to come over and we're going to do the same thing here. And I like to do this before I go to the iron, just because I don't have to worry about it shrinking or anything, but now I have this nice straight line there. And now we're going to go over and press the rest of this at the iron. But remember our starch, our acorn pin here that we're going to use. We're going to run that right through along that edge. And I will tell you that you should test this on some of your fabrics, because every once in a while you'll pick up a batik that's really gonna run bad for you. And if you have this, because this is a liquid and you put that on, it may run. So you want to test that against your batiks to make sure it's not going to run if you're working with white fabrics or really light fabric. Now we're going to take this and we're going to come in, we're going to press that seam. And there we go. And I'm just going to leave these little paper tabs on here until I'm ready to actually assemble the quilt, because it'll keep those tips from fraying and the threads from coming out. And there's our first piece. Okay, after we get our applique pieces glued on, you can actually add the rest of the base at this time. And so it's probably better because it gives us a little bit more room to hold on to. So you're gonna position your templates, and if you look, we have T-template A2, we have T-template A3, and then we have T-template A4 and T-template A5, and they go on in that order. So we go 2, 3, 4, and 5. And so I'm gonna sew one on of each one of these pieces to show you. So we're gonna pull it off at the bottom. And I'm just gonna keep these in order for me to make sure that I'm getting them positioned the right way. Because it's really easy to get these pieces flipped over. And then you have to pick them off. Okay, so we have all of our pieces in order now, so I'm gonna take the very first piece and I'm just gonna flip it over, and notice that I have a smart corner here and I have a smart corner there. And I'm actually gonna leave that little piece of paper on there for right now as I sew that edge. And I'm gonna take and put some glue along that. Get that glued in place, and then I'm just gonna keep going down my piece and glue the raw edges together, and we're gonna position that one right where it needs to go, and then we're gonna go sew that seam. I'm gonna pick this up. And I'm going to pull this paper off now. And I'm going to reuse that to start my thread. And I got a little zigzag stitch going, so we're going to check that. All right, now my needle down. And I'm going to place this piece right underneath there. We're going to sew right off the end, and now we're going to go press that. First of all, we're going to press and set that seam because it's not paper pieced. And then we're going to take that and press that out just like that. I'm going to take the next piece over here and flip that so that we have right sides together, and see how nice those ends match up. You're going to place the smart corners, glue them in place, And then just take and run a little bit of glue all the way down that edge. Put that one in place. And the rest of it's just gonna be eased in there. I'm gonna start sewing on my paper. And I'm gonna lift my pressure foot and place it right along the edge and then start sewing. We're gonna run over to the iron again. I'm just gonna finger press this open a little bit. We're gonna remove that little bit of paper there. Cut that thread. Now this piece goes on here like this. And this one's a little tricky, but if you look at it, there's a little corner here on this piece right here, and that has to be matched up. So we started out like this, and then this is gonna get flipped over because this is the right side, and we're gonna put right sides together, okay? And now we're gonna glue this end here and get that onto that corner properly. Okay, now this is, a lot of this is gonna be on bias edge and stuff, and it's real flimsy. So it may seem to be a little loose and stretch on you. So see how it seems to be a little bit loose there? So I'm just gonna take my iron and I'm gonna steam that. And I'm just setting the steam irons just off of the fabric, but it'll shrink that piece right back down to the size it needs to be. And just run the steam on it. There we go. Now I can lift this up. I don't even have to, it's already still, it's got a little bit of glue on it that I put on there, so we're good to sew. And now we're gonna sew right along that. Now under here, I'm gonna get a little piece of paper and put under there so that I can actually extend that line out straight, okay? I drew a straight line along here so that when I get ready to sew, I can actually run this right along the edge, and now I'll know where to keep my pressure foot so that it'll come right off where it's supposed to come off. Otherwise, that tip has a tendency to get lost on you. We're going to start down at the bottom. I'm going to sew, just put a little piece of paper under there to get this started. Okay, so now I'm going to slip this paper under there and line that line right up to the edge of my fabric there, the raw edge. And see how that looks now? So I came right off of that edge there, right up to that point, and I just kept my pressure foot along that straight edge. So now we're going to take our glue stick and I'm going to run some glue right along that, just a little bit, and we're just going to push this back so that now that's going to lay flat there. If that little tip is off a little bit, we can just cut that off, but now I'm gonna end up with my straight line. So I'm gonna grab my ruler, and I'm just gonna make sure that that lays flat in there for me. So I have a nice straight edge. Now we're gonna iron it. We're gonna do the same thing down here. So we have our piece right here. This is my right side up. I'm gonna flip it. So we have right sides together, and I'm gonna glue right along that little angle there. Then we're going to come down. We're going to match the tip. And everything else is going to be eased in and so on. Because your pieces are cut to the right size. So now I'm gonna go get me another little piece of paper so I can sew on that straight line and draw a line on it. I'm gonna start up at that edge this time. You'll never get your machine to just start sewing right on that tip. So if you'll put this paper underneath there, now we can actually get the machine started sewing on the paper. And then we just have to let the fabric pull through with the paper. Now we grab our blue pen, and again we're just gonna kind of roll this out just a little bit here to get this so that it's folds out nice and straight for us. And then I'm gonna cut that straight along there. Whoops, I gotta get up on my board here. And we're gonna go press. I'm just gonna do a little bit of finger pressing here. And we're going to do our final pressing. Okay, so here again, it's okay to just leave this paper somewhat attached here until you're ready to actually start sewing, because that'll keep those tips from fraying right there. All right, so now we have a nice straight line here, nice straight line here, and our pieces are done, and we're ready to set up and go applique. All right, ladies, this is how you're going to set up your machine. All machines are going to be a little bit different, but you want to turn it on to where it's a straight stitch. And I'm going to actually do a really tiny zigzag stitch for my applique because it looks like a little scalloped stitch around your pieces. So I'm going to just turn my applique, or touch the zigzag, and I want to go up on this machine. I have to go to a 0.9 or a 0.8. All right, then I'm going to bring my stitch length down to about 1.5. All right, and that's going to give me a little teeny zigzag stitch. Now I'm gonna, if I have a single hole plate, go ahead and put your single hole plate on, and you can actually have an open toe applique foot if you have that as well, because the stitch is going to be so tiny it won't break your needle. All right, so the first thing you've got to do to applique is, I have a size 60 needle in here, which is a real tiny needle, and my thread weight that I'm using is a silk 100 weight, and I really like the way the silks look. So remember I talked about being able to pull these pieces up a little bit. So I'm going to pull just the tip of that stem away, and I'm going to take my first, and I'm going to get my thread down there, and I'm going to roll the needle down like to just about to the down position and make sure it's right along the edge of the fabric. And then I'm going to bring my thread up. So you have to bring your thread to the top, and then you're going to wrap that thread around your fingers 3 or 4 times so it's really tight. And then you're going to get that needle right down along the edge of the fabric again. So it's right along the edge where I'm going to start. Okay, and now I'm going to just hold my fabric, and I'm going to do 2 or 3 little stitches right on top of each other. Okay, and then I'm just going to let go of my thread, and I'm going to do a really tiny zigzag. And before I go, I want to have my needle down, so I'm going to put that down. I'm just going to check and see if I like it. And oh, I love it. So we're going to keep going. We're going to just do that little teeny zigzag all the way around. Okay, right before I get to the tip, I'm going to slow way down. And then about a 1/16 of an inch before I get to the tip, I'm going to reach up and I'm going to increase the width about to 1.2 on the zigzag width, and I'm going to go down to about a 0.5 on the length, and I'm going to just do a teeny satin stitch right over the tip of that, so that I can get that tip. And it's just gonna, when it hits the end, it's gonna jump right over the end of that tip. And then we're gonna roll it around, and we're gonna bring our needle back up, and we're gonna make sure that it's laying right underneath there. And then we're gonna start sewing till it goes over that tip. And after I get 3 or 4 stitches, then I'm going to go back and adjust my stitch length down to where, and back where I was. So you're going to want to keep track of where your stitch length is, and then we just sew down. And before I get down to where that stem is, I'm going to pull these threads out of the way, and I'm going to roll this stem back just a little bit, right along that edge. If I can get to it, there we go. And I'm going to bury that, stitch that down, and I'm going to bury it and do 2 or 3 stitches right on top of each other. Then, instead of stopping and cutting my thread, I just bring it over and I roll to the next one in that same position. And I'm gonna get that back, folded back, because then I don't have to hold on to my thread again. And we're gonna get 2 or 3 stitches right on top of each other. And right before I get to the tip, I'm going to increase my stitch length width again, go down in my length, and go right over the top of that tip. And then we're going to roll it around. You're going to bring your needle up and readjust it. Do 2 or 3 stitches down, and then go back up, down. And you're going to want to hold your fabric. You shouldn't have to have a stabilizer under this. You should be able to just hold that fabric flat on the surface. And before I get down there, I'm just going to roll this piece back a little bit. Bury that thread. And then I'm going to move down to this piece. So like what I like to do is be able to do all the same color thread, and then we'll go change the thread. And we'll keep doing this until we get all of the pieces on there.
Thank you for joining us today to learn to make the basket diamond block for the Valley Blossoms project. Over the next few weeks, please work on your paper piecing for the diamonds, then join us again on June 13th to learn to make the flowering cactus 16-inch squares. If you are going to do turn under applique, you can work on your applique for this design. If you are planning to complete the digitized embroidery design from Vanessa Fromm on July 25th, we will be releasing an entire video showcasing her techniques. You will complete these steps before you assemble your quilt. If this is your plan, simply complete the paper piecing on each diamond block and set them aside. We look forward to the next workshop in June. Happy quilting!